Debra Providence is a writer, artist, educator, researcher, make-believer, and mother. She was born in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Debra currently resides in Barbados, where she teaches the Advanced Seminar, West Indian Literature, Contemporary Poetry, African Film, and Contemporary Science Fiction at the Cave Hill campus of the University of the West Indies. Her research interests include Caribbean and African diaspora women writer, science, speculative fiction, graphic novels, feminism, and creative writing pedagogy. Her works have appeared in the Caribbean Review of Gender Studies, Journal of Eastern Caribbean Studies, Scholar and Feminist Online, Pui, Callaloo, Sable Lit Mag, and the Journal of West Indian Literature.
Hi, my name is Debra Providence, and I am going to be sharing with you an excerpt from a work in progress called Kandace of Kingstown. It is an alternate history, or it imagines an alternate history of St. Vincent, where we were not colonized by the British or the French, and we have closer ties or had closer ties with the African continent. So it imagines how St. Vincent would have evolved without the colonial influence and with stronger ties to the African continent. At the heart of this story is the protagonist, Kandace, and she and her family are caught in the crosshairs of a conspiracy involving local and foreign interests. The excerpt I'm about to share with you is called Pray, and it takes place in a dark, lonely Kingstown street. Night descended on Ghani and had settled into every street corner and Powderhead Alley. A patrolman strolled below one of the city lamps, his white feathers catching its yellow glow. He swung his truncheon with the ease of someone who had always taken this route and had seen all that it could offer. My prince, a woman's voice like syrup from a black gara tree called to him from the semi-lit alley just as the patrolman walked by. My good prince, come and share my cane wine. You are a bold woman to approach a servant of the Council of Ghani, the patrolman had said, his voice sounding grave. Yet he made no move to arrest her. It is okay. You and I are old friends. She stepped out of her doorway into the path of the patrolman. If your chief asks, I am your school friend with whom you stopped to share a drink for old time's sake. She sashayed up to the patrolman, her silk wrapper clinging to her ample curves, and she leveled him with her stare, linking her arms with him, within his. He stood there, his body taut and his demeanor unyielding. You could say that you did not want your old friend to drink all this fine maca wine alone. The woman in the doorway grabbed the patrolman by his waist and gently pulled him towards her hut. He did not protest, offered only a sly smile of consent. He paused at the entrance of the hut that was lit by a solitary candle, turned his head and took a gander at the street to see if anyone was watching. Except for two vagrants huddled on the filthy rags that stank of urine and human sweat, the alley and his portion of the street were empty. He lowered his head and stepped into the hut, but thought he caught a glimpse of something, a shadow, stealing across the rooftop to his adjacent. He turned, training his eyes in the direction of the movement. Come on, my prince. The woman wrapped her arms around his back this time, spreading her fingers and molding herself into him. Let us not waste this night, so dark and heavy as it is. It needs good company and strong wine. Whatever thoughts the patrolman had of that flicker of shadow left his mind. and the woman with the silk wrapper and the broad welcoming smile pulled him into her hut. In another part of the city, the giant black metal doors of the Ghani High Council heaved open, and the clean-shaved head of Ija emerged. He peered around, eyeing the main street that separated the court from the Ghani markets. Then, seemingly satisfied that they were not being watched, he stepped from behind the door, laughing. One hand held the roasted leg of a large chicken. His other arm was around the shoulders of one Albert Benjamin, a jittery, graying man with pocked skin and a pasty complexion. Benjamin mopped his brow, drenched even with the coolness of the Unari night. He too looked up and down the long back street, his unease evident. He hated this part of his duties as the messenger for the admiral, especially having to deal with Ija, who took pleasure in making him as uncomfortable as possible, always so hands-on. He hated it even more these nights because lately he felt as though he was being watched. It was an unsettling feeling that something on the edge of his vision was stalking him through the streets, but that something would disappear whenever he turned his head. He saw nothing, of course, but his neck hairs would remain on end. Ija laughed and slapped him on his shoulder with his chicken-free hand. "Why are you so scaredy, Bakra man?" He tore the flesh from the chicken leg and spoke with his mouth full of its meat. "You should take more time to enjoy the island night on your walk." Benjamin swallowed and mustered something that started as a laugh but ended up as a wheezing squeak when Ija grabbed him up again. "Go on, man." Ija ushered him into the street. "No one will touch you. They might think you're a jumbie and run away." The pale man's back stiffened, but he managed a weak smile while Ija's raucous laughter shattered the quiet. "Ha ha! When you think you are scared of them, it is them who are truly scared of you." Ija laughed, stepped inside the council doors, and then re-emerged with a leather satchel, which he rammed into the chest of the foreigner. "Go now, man. You are keeping me from much better smelling company, eh?" Ija wiped his hand that once held the chicken on the shoulder of Albert Benjamin's waistcoat, and then he slapped the man on his back, sending him stumbling out towards the gate. Oh, okay. Yes, all right then," Mr. Benjamin gulped. He bustled to the large gates and with some effort pushed through them. The hinges of the great gate groaned in the way of metal against rusted metal. The foreigner, twitching and mopping his neck, looked up and down the long back street and then turned right, heading north towards Old Kingstown. He stashed the satchel under his arm, hustling as quickly as his worn-down boot heels allowed. The skin on his exposed neck prickled with tiny bumps. Something was behind him, he was sure of it, watching him in the dark, a shadow among shadows. For his part, the pale, portly Benjamin moved quickly, resting only when he reached the cobblestone bridge that arced over the North River of Old Kingstown. Still, he clutched the satchel. His chest heaved as he took his breath in short, raspy gulps. A sound, like bricks falling and smashing against concrete, startled him out of his fatigue. He hustled across the bridge, stumbling over uneven cobblestones as he did, his sense of dread growing with every step. He slipped into the narrow alley that led down to the jetty where the oarsman had moored the skiff. He was almost there. The alley stank of vice and rum, a combination that churned in his gut. He would feel a lot better once he was on the skiff, taking in full breaths of sea air, his oarsman pushing away from the shore. There was a flutter on the still air, like wind whipping a sail. Benjamin froze mid-step, then spun on his heel to peer into the dark. He chided himself for stopping and then turned back towards the sea. It was then that he saw it, the figure rising from a crouched position beneath the lone street lamp in the alleyway, its form obscured by lengthy billowing black cape, its head a grimacing mask of black with flaming eyes and a mouth formed into a skull. Benjamin's heart thundered. The figure did not speak, nor did it move, standing as it was between Benjamin and his goal. It stood there studying him, freezing him with its ghastly stare. He followed the figure's black arms with his eyes as they disappeared inside the flowing black cape, and still, watching, felt his throat run dry as it produced what looked like a bamboo stick, bringing it to its mouth. The already pale Benjamin had now turned bone white. He stood immobile. So hypnotized he was by the spectacle of this black masked figure that he barely registered the slightest prick in the skin on his neck. He tried to move his hands towards his throat, but found it heavy. He tried to move his hand towards his throat and found it heavy, as though it were cased in lead. The satchel fell from its nook under his arm. Something warm trickled down his leg. He tried to look, but he could not move his head. He tried to call for the oarsman, but the only sounds to escape his throat were strangled, gurgling, and wheezing noises. The figure in black stood facing him the whole time. His eyes grew heavy, and the last thing Albert Benjamin saw was the piss-stink cobbled street of the narrow alley coming up to meet him. It was almost dawn when he came to. His oarsman, a sorely man whose naval uniform was looking worse for the wear, was shaking him awake. Benji, a look of scorn mixed with impatience lit across his sunburnt face. Benjamin, you need to get up now, man. You should sleep on your own damn time. Get up, Mr. Benji. Albert blinked and shook his head. He wondered how he ended up asleep in the alley. He tried to retrace his step, but a fog settled in his brain, making it hard for him to think. There he was on the narrow street when he should have been on his skiff, making his way towards the base of the old fort. The fort! He looked around for the satchel. Where's your satchel, Benji? The oarsman was eyeing him through narrowed eyes. Panic formed a knot around Albert's gut. It's gone, he stammered. Gone, you say? The oarsman replied. Well, how in the bloody hell did you let that happen? Albert Benjamin scratched his chin stubble as he sat there in the alley leading down to the lower bay jetty. And then he resigned himself to the truth that he had no way of answering that question.